Hello and welcome to the big picture. The last week's bomb blasts in Hyderabad resulting in the ghastly killing of 16 people and leaving over 100 injured has brought back into focus the role of intelligence agencies. Ironically, the Home Minister Sushil Kumar Shinde himself has kicked up a controversy saying that there was prior information about such plans. The question why, despite prior information, the blasts could not be prevented has raised the larger question of the need for intelligence reforms in the country. Vice President Hamid Ansari had triggered a debate about 3 years back while delivering the R.N. Kaur Memorial Lecture, seeking accountability of intelligence agencies to Parliament. The present system, where these agencies have no statutory backing, has led to several concerns about its effectiveness, among other things. The Vice President's suggestion had led to the Institute of Defence Studies and Analysis setting up a task force to study the problem and make recommendations. Meanwhile, a PIL in Supreme Court filed by well-known lawyer Prashant Bhushan seeking reforms is pending. The Apex Court has also issued notice to the centre seeking its response to the PIL. Some MPs have also made similar demands for making intelligence agencies accountable. Today, we will discuss all this while looking at how imperative it has become for intelligence reforms and accountability to Parliament. To discuss this, I have with me DC Pathak, former Director, Intelligence Bureau, Rana Banerji, former Special Secretary in Cabinet Secretariat, who headed the IDSA task force, Ajay Kumar, Lok Sabha member from Jharkhand, a former police officer and someone who has passionately advocated reforms, and R. Prasannan, Chief of Bureau, The Week magazine in Delhi. Welcome to all of you. Let me go to Mr. Banerji first. Mr. Banerji, your report just last year after the task force report has come out with several, you have analyzed the problem and you also given recommendations. Now can you tell us the main problems which these intelligence agencies face today?
See, modern day theorists on intelligence reform have the following main concerns about oversight. One relates to legality of the agencies and the action that is to be taken by intelligence officers in the day-to-day functions.
Right.
The second aspect is effectiveness. The third aspect is budgeting and accountability, accounting. The fourth aspect is oversight. And the fifth aspect is violation or otherwise of human rights in the course of taking your actions.
Right. Okay. So you have, very succinctly laid down the 5 points which are there. But let us if we look at the Hyderabad issue, what happened last week in Hyderabad, where does the problem lie?
Well, it's difficult to pinpoint any particular issue. If there is an intelligence input, it has to go down to the local agency, that is the local police, and they have to then look at it from the point of view of the data that is there,
right,
and the position on the ground.
Right.
And it would seem that they have done this, but it was a very large area over which the alert was sounded, also about the reconnaissance information which was given by the Delhi police.
Right.
And the Hyderabad authorities indicated that they had looked at this very closely. They had even sent teams to interrogate.
Right.
But even then it may not have been possible to prevent it. Despite all the precautions being taken, this sort of thing can happen.
Okay. Mr. Ajay Kumar? Mr. Ajay Kumar, you have recently also made this. You have recently also made this point about accountability of the intelligence agencies to Parliament and things like that. But as a former police officer who has dealt with things on the ground, this Hyderabad instance, is it something which could have been prevented, you think, or you think this is the right time for us to push forward the reforms which have been talked about for a long time?
No, if you look at it, Girish, look at the history of from whether it's 2611, whether it is repeated events. There has never been any kind of a detection or a conviction or a prevention. So if we are going to say that, look, we couldn't have prevented Hyderabad, maybe we couldn't have prevented. But can we prevent so many repeated events with such an inflated, what you call, I don't know whether it's inflated or not. Firstly, whether the intelligence bureau or the RAW is too big or small. It's a debatable question. But if the best practice across the world has oversight in terms of there should be a statutory provision, there should be a minister, there should be an accountability, there should be budget oversight. I think it can only improve the system. Otherwise, how are we different from the Pakistan ISI yet? I mean, over a period, believe me, that if an intelligence organization which has no accountability and you believe that monsters will not come in and interfere, the chances of it going wrong is very high. So the issue is effectiveness. And the other interesting part, which I keep debating, a lot of intelligence bureau inputs, and I'm sure Mr. Pathak and Banerji will agree, is on political espionage,
Yes.
And it doesn't make sense in a democratic setup to have a political, I mean, we can hire Mr. Pranay Roy or Yogendra Yadav instead of, looking at, intelligence bureau officials assessing what is the future of a political party, what are the election results, etc., etc. So the fact is that intelligence bureau is used for political purposes. Should it be used in a modern democracy? Definitely not. Are they effective? We don't know. We don't know what are they. So you don't even know. So actually, it will be in the interest of the intelligence organization. Nobody is going to ask them on security, actual operations. But infrastructure, coordination between various. There's so many silos, NTRO and RAW, and so at the end of the day, if somebody is going to come up and say our intelligence agency is greatly efficient, I don't know. We don't even know whether they are efficient or not efficient.
Absolutely.
And I hate to see in a democratic setup and an organization which operates in shadows.
Absolutely. I think
you have to have a method. I mean, you can't keep, raising the boogie of national security and saying we cannot hold them accountable. So whatever be the method, in camera, you can define the method. If the defense ministry budgets are discussed in these parliamentary committees, if every other ministry and if the CIA does it, if the FBI does it,
and many
if the
other
MI6 or whatever it is. So
yes.
The question is find out an optimal solution which addresses the concerns of the intelligence community. But hey, in government, it is critically important, Girish, to make people accountable. One of the biggest angst as a political person, I'm not speaking for the politician because we are also pretty bad in delivery, but the governance delivery in all our institutions because of lack of accountability. So let us start somewhere.
Absolutely. Mr. Pathak?
Yeah, I think
is there a resistance to this kind of accountability? One of the things is that, as Mr. Ajay Kumar was pointing out, security issues, national security, we can't be so open. This is the normal thing which we keep hearing. Why this resistance?
You see, my first response is that debate on discussion on matters of national security must have a professional streak about them because they are not. I mean, national security is not a matter of debate, it's a matter of assessment, right? And any kind of a sort of, you and me kind of debate doesn't help. So let us go professional. What is security? Security is protection against covert threats.
Right.
If the enemy is invisible, his planning is very kept to himself. And if he can work through remote control through a team of 2 or 3 persons from a distance, challenge of uncovering what is covert is not easy.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately or fortunately, you establish agencies which have been functioning over the decades who are devoted 24/7 into this with varying degree of success. But the fact that the information on covert enemy, that's the definition of intelligence, is not there on the commodity which can be bought easily. A mix of human and technological endeavor go into that. You may collect 20% of the whole picture, right? And in a situation where this function is spread across various agencies, internal, external.
This is exactly
right.
The
Therefore,
point.
Professionally,
Yes.
What comes first? That no information is lost. And Kargil report said that 66 pieces of intelligence never traveled to the national apex. I don't want to bring in NCTC here, but it's my concern as a former intelligence
NTRO
chief
is also
several agencies, and there's a division of labor.
No, NCTC will discuss NCTC
but divided intelligence is of no use. So my first recommendation of any sort would be establish an intelligence round table at the national apex where all the concerned agencies bring their material so that the first flaw of what we saw in Kargil does not happen. Now
and that
you have got
continues to happen today.
Now you have now second point is even more important because it's connected with how specific is your forecast or prediction and how specific is your alert. or how unspecific is your alert. Now, take the case of Bombay blast. I mean, Hyderabad blast. I mean, I don't know exactly what was known and what was disseminated, but it seems that there was a communication expressing concern that there is some kind of an imminence about an
Yes,
attack.
and even the area was notified.
Now, what has happened in Hyderabad? These twin blasts have proved an ugly reminder that we remain at the receiving end of the kind of terrorism which we have seen over the years. And I should call it the cross-border terrorism, because the enemy is using that as an instrument, even though there are elements here who are now part of cells or whatever. Now, it also tells us with a great kind of a thing which the leadership must note, that the period of quiet was deceptive. The enemy was preparing all the time. So don't go into take any comfort that Pathak, it has happened after a long time.
That's right. But Mr. Pathak, my original question was, why is there this resistance for this for any kind of supervision or oversight of the functioning of these intelligence
No,
agencies?
I thought I'll come to the oversight.
Yes.
My second step is that whatever collectivity of intelligence is there, it may not be specific in terms of individual place and time frame of the threat materialization. But again, take the example of Hyderabad. If it was said that an attack of this kind, with which this country is very familiar, can happen, then you have mapped the centers on the map of India which are vulnerable. So I would expect in theory, and it's not really theory, that all concerned agencies on the ground, and the state police in particular, would have been able to say, we have done our best to put this scan on these pockets. Then if it happens, I mean, there is no blame game in
this. This is
it.
exactly the point which
because security is for prevention. Once something happens.
You're still not answering my point about the resistance from the intelligence agencies as far as oversight is concerned. Prasannan, do you agree that there is a resistance? And if you agree that there is resistance, why that resistance?
Resistance, I won't be able to say whether there is actually a resistance, but because in this case, now who has asked for intelligence oversight? There is a notice from the Supreme Court.
Right.
Now, Supreme Court, I wonder whether the Supreme Court is slightly overstepping its limits because
it has given a notice to the center
to
in the case of the PIL.
But the oversight, if we are talking of parliamentary oversight, parliamentary oversight is the topic that is the issue that is at center of it, I think it should be the parliament that should be asking for oversight powers over intelligence agencies. So I think we should be keeping the Supreme Court thing aside. But has Parliament asked for oversight? No, by and large, I would say there should be a fair amount of satisfaction in Parliament that the intelligence agencies are doing their job.
You think so? You think that's?
I mean, there will always be the opposition and the ruling party. The disagreements are always there.
So
but as an institution, I don't think Parliament hasn't asked for it. There was a private member's bill last year,
Manish
Tiwari,
yes.
but it wasn't taken further up. So, which means there has not been a demand from Parliament for more powers to have oversight.
Let me get Ajay on this. Ajay, you think that the Parliament is more or less convinced about the present, the way the present things are functioning, and people like you are just one of those people who, you are not the majority, you are just, this is my hopeless minority asking for this. Is that the situation?
No, look, the first question is, I don't think we are a minority because yesterday when I spoke in the parliament on this issue, the leader of the opposition and the various other political parties and even in the Congress, the fact is we need to address, my request to my senior colleagues on the discussion is, the fact of life we need, as Indians, we need to recognize that the Intelligence Bureau is used for a lot of political work.
Absolutely.
It should not be used for that.
Yes.
First question. So,
yes.
Can we use that manpower? Then the second issue is, the second issue is accountability. Any organization which is itself not statutory and unaccountable, over a period will develop evilness and sloth, like it or not, however sincere you are. Because Let's not, put the bogey of nationalism and patriotism and say that, look, all intelligence officers, because the moment you give power which is unbridled and unchecked, whatever be the method you might define it,
Right.
you're definitely going to create a monster down the line. We didn't create a monster. It is remarkable of the officers who lead it. But sometimes there's going to be some evil guy who's going to go crazy and do it.
So
the first issue is that how in a democracy...
No, Ajay, there are a lot of
Girish,
concerns
no, what I'm saying,
expressed.
the second issue,
Yes, yes.
No, the first question is, I want to say that any organization should be accountable in any democracy to a parliamentary oversight as
Absolutely.
a process.
Yes.
The second issue is the parliamentary committee process is able to question it on infrastructure, on coordination, and so is able to push the agenda for a better intelligence setup.
Absolutely.
So I don't think it's going to be going against the interest.
Yes, Ajay.
The third important point, I think, is when we talk about
Ajay, we'll come back to these points. We need to
Girish, I would just want to say that, listen,
quickly.
I want to finish off with one small statement. I'm saying I speak to my colleagues and my batchmates in the Indian Police Service and others, and I keep saying that it's in the interest of the country and it's also in the interest of the intelligence community to have, because today nobody knows, and the most important part, Girish, is please pull off those 30% political observation manpower used to something more useful.
Absolutely.
Like protecting this country.
Absolutely. Anyway, we need to go into a short break now. We'll come back and continue this discussion. There are several other issues which needs to be discussed today. We are discussing the issue of intelligence reforms and asking whether there should be parliament accountability of these intelligence agencies. Mr. Banerji, coming back to you. No, it's a very significant point which Ajay is making, is that about how a lot of, I will ask this question to Mr. Pathak also. I want a response from you also. How a lot of manpower is being used for political espionage, for political issues, which in a democracy, we should be avoiding it. Do you agree with that? During your study, did you come across these problems?
Yes, absolutely. We agree with this, and in our report, we have clearly categorized a step-by-step process which can bring about modernization and reform. The first step is to provide legal status to the three main agencies, that is the IB, the RAW and the NTRO.
Right.
And this could be done in a single bill or in a separate bill.
Right.
This particular investing of legal status itself can bring in accountability or concepts of accountability. If you take the pattern of the British intelligence agencies, on which we are perhaps most closely modeled over history, then we could go in for the parliamentary committee form of oversight, which is presently in vogue for the last at least 25 years. And it has not weakened the efficiency of the agencies in question.
And also Australian system also has a similar system, I think.
Yes, Australia, they came in later, but first to bring in accountability were after the Church and Pike Committee reports in USA and the Maxwell 5 directives in UK. And there was a Harman and Hewitt case which said that the MI5 should have a legal status. And for only after that the Security Service legislation came in 1989 and the MI6 or the SIS legislation came in 1994.
So, Mr. Banerji, the other concerns expressed is about the accounting, that the huge funds are deployed for these activities. There is no accountability. We don't know how much money is being spent. Is there a way that these things can be made accountable without compromising on the actual working, the operations of these agencies?
Yes, it can be done. In fact, the normal budget of the intelligence organizations, both the IB and the RAW, are audited by the CAG, and there is a special office of the Director of Accounts in the special wing of the Cabinet Secretariat, and they look into these accounts. But the Secret Service funds are not so far being audited, though there is a authorization report annually which is given. But even in this, the CAG at a very high level should be associated, and we have actually recommended this in our report.
Okay, Mr. Pathak. Mr. Pathak, you have to answer this question about Parliament accountability, also what Mr. Ajay said. You have been the director of IB. He is saying, and we all know that a lot of effort of the intelligence agencies goes into political espionage. What the government, the party in power uses the intelligence agencies recklessly.
The first point is, I don't know where from this word resistance to oversight has emanated. Certainly, I can speak from the professional community. Professional community has no issues with this. If there is resistance from political quarters, that's a different thing. Because in a parliamentary democracy, parliament must have the oversight over the political executive that runs the state.
Right.
It runs the government, but actually through government running the state.
Absolutely.
And it has a right to satisfy itself at all wings of the government. And therefore, why not national security also? It should have a means of satisfying itself. That national security policy is in sync with national security estimates, and in view of the fact that now we have political complexions of states and center may change, that national security handling is above party politics.
There's another issue.
They can satisfy themselves.
There's another issue which I want to flag. There is I think the task force report also has mentioned it, and about dividing the security and the intelligence aspect. You think that is a feasible thing? Because security and intelligence are getting, they have suggested that there should be a national director for intelligence and a national security advisor. These two have to be.
You see, I feel distressed that in these debates on national security, apples and oranges are being mixed up all the time.
Yes.
I mean, if
So
you talk of
security and intelligence, apples and oranges.
I saw some people saying that this blast, if there was a beat constable, it might have helped. I mean, they don't know the man in uniform is different from the man who collects intelligence. He doesn't have to, he cannot wear uniform if he's doing the second.
Yes.
So, police and intelligence, security and intelligence. Intelligence is the information handler.
Absolutely.
Police is the response, part of the response mechanism.
Right.
And I think it is because that equation seemed to have been disturbed that we saw so much of dissent on NCTC.
Right.
We are not discussing that.
No, we have, the NCTC has been discussed. NCTC is an important thing. Ajay, I want you to comment on this, that the recommendation of some of these reports says that security and intelligence have to be bifurcated. You think that's a feasible thing to do, and would it be productive?
No, look, I'm not. I've been in the, and I'm very proud of my career as in the Indian Police Service. So for me, it's I don't know how to distinguish between the security and intelligence or bifurcation. Like Mr. Banerji and Mr. Pathak have said that I think what the recommendations, Girish, of what they are saying is actually very, very important, and I don't want this discussion to miss that. One is to give a statutory status to the intelligence organizations.
Yes.
So that the moment you give a statutory status, so it brings into a lot of what you call credibility to the organization.
Right.
The other part which is very critically important is that the men who man these intelligence organizations are of very decent, and some of them are outstanding, some of them are decent, and some of them obviously may not be outstanding. But overall, they are a decent group of people doing their job. So my only angst is if they are spending their time on a non-productive thing like the political espionage, which is not a national security issue. It also brings a lot of discredit to it brings a lot of lack of professionalism to the intelligence organization.
Absolutely.
Because the moment an intelligence organization starts kowtowing political agendas,
I think you have made a point.
It brings a non-professional aspect to the whole leadership of intelligence community.
Yes. You have made a point, Ajay. Yes, Prasannan.
I think we have to make a distinction here because the oranges and apples were raised, but at the same time we have to realize that the intelligence agency is a generator or collector of intelligence, whereas the police is a consumer of intelligence.
Right.
And police in its executive function as the consumer, and it acts on that. There, yes, it is accountable to Parliament and all that. Whereas the kind of accountability that we are now demanding of intelligence agencies, I do wonder how effective would that be if intelligence agencies are. The other issue is that accountability to who? Accountability need not always be to Parliament. Accountability can be to top. Accountability can also be to the bottom.
As it exists now.
As it exists now, there is an accountability.
The IB chief is accountable. Is, goes and reports to the Prime Minister and the Home Minister. Sometimes he doesn't.
And so there is a whole system which is.
Yes, Ajay. Yes, Ajay.
I totally disagree with Mr. Krishnan, sir. I find it abhorrent in a modern democracy that we can have this. I'm sorry if I'm being very strong, but how can you believe, then how are we different from ISI?
Absolutely.
I find this whole discussion on this issue, Mr. Krishnan, sir, I definitely disagree vehemently, because
there is a difference.
How can you believe that and that is what the problem with the country is. Civils, intelligence community, civil servants, no accountability. I report to some boss who's not going to hold me accountable on performance.
Absolutely.
I feel that why should not if UK is doing it, Australia is doing it, and then our history has been so repeated. And most important part, Girish, none of the intelligence community officials are confronting the brutal fact that 40% or 50% of manpower goes on political intelligence. Does the country need to afford that?
Yes,
is it important to spy on opposition leader or give an election forecast?
I fully agree with you. Mr. Banerji coming...
So my request is, my request to my esteemed colleagues is, at least let's have the integrity to tell that we do political espionage.
Yes. But I don't think that...
we don't even have that much of integrity, then where will you have accountability?
Ajay, we all know that, but nobody is going to admit it anyway. Mr. Banerji, the human resources...
So that is the problem, sir. So if we can't admit this, then why have a discussion? We are then against the same... and then we say that intelligence community is doing their job.
Ajay, we are running out of time. I want to get Banerji in on this. Mr. Banerji, another important aspect in your report was about the human resources, the kind of human resources. Who are the kind of people who get into the intelligence service? And you also spoken about the need for getting people from science and technology, communication, information technology. What is happening now, and do you think that change is in the process?
Yes, indeed. In fact, if we need to modernize, we must go for open recruitment at all levels. And at present only we are getting officers on deputation from the All India services, which is not perhaps the best system. So all modern intelligence agencies are going for direct recruitment to tap the best talent. And I think we should sooner or later follow suit.
Okay. Prasannan, last words to you. That, you still continue to think that there is no need for a parliament, oversight
oversight. No, statutory status and all is different, but parliamentary oversight for day-to-day functioning is not
possible.
Not like in the case of defense.
There was a
if oversight means that the panels of parliament sitting wants to go into what operations are being run, I think that mix up. But the intelligence agency is run under the trust of the government. It's for the government to create the trust with the parliament that their utilization of agencies is flawless.
Okay. Anyway, this is a discussion. It's been a very interesting discussion with with the panelists divided on whether there should be a parliament's oversight of these agencies or not. Anyway, this is a debate which needs to continue. Let's see how this will all pan out in the coming days. The Supreme Court is looking at this whole issue. We will keep a close watch on all this. Thanks to all my guests, Ajay, Kumar, Rana, Banerji, DC Pathak, and Prasannan. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue on The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.